Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Asterisk, the devil's bargain. The rain hammered against the windows of the once grand Winter's mansion like angry fists demanding entry. Inside the mahogany-paneled study, Theodore Winters sat hunched over his desk, surrounded by towers of unpaid bills and legal documents that seemed to mock his former success. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and built shopping empires now looked like a broken shadow of himself. Celeste pushed open the heavy oak door, balancing a tray of tea in her delicate hands. At 22, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that made strangers pause in the street, cascading auburn hair that caught light like spun copper, emerald eyes that sparkled with intelligence and kindness, and a figure that moved with unconscious grace. She had been sheltered from the harsh realities of their crumbling world, protected by her father's desperate attempts to maintain their facade of wealth. "Daddy, you haven't eaten all day?" she said softly, setting the tray beside the mountain of papers. Her voice carried the gentle concern of a daughter who had watched her father's spirit slowly die over the past months. Theodore looked up, his bloodshot eyes focusing on her face with difficulty. The bourbon on his breath told its own story of how he had been coping with their situation. "Celeste, sweetheart," his voice cracked like old leather, "we need to talk." She settled into the leather chair across from him, her flowing sundress spreading around her like flower petals. The dress had been a gift from better times, when shopping trips to Paris were casual weekend activities rather than impossible dreams. Now it served as a reminder of everything they had lost. "Is it about the house again?" she asked, though. She already knew the answer. The foreclosure notices had been arriving with increasing frequency, each one another nail in the coffin of their former life. Theodore's hands trembled as he reached for his glass. "It's worse than that, darling. Much worse." He took a shaky sip before continuing. "The debt's there, not just about the house. I borrowed money from people who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse." Celeste felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "What kind of people? The kind who collect their debts one way or another?" Theodore's voice was barely a whisper. "I thought I could turn things around, make enough to pay them back. Every investment failed. Every deal fell through. Now they want their money, and they want it within the week." The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 7 times, each note echoing through the room like a countdown to doom. Celeste watched her father's face crumble as he spoke, seeing the man who had once been her hero reduced to this broken creature. "How much do we owe?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. $15 million. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Celeste's world tilted. 15 million might as well have been 15 billion for all their ability to pay it. "There has to be something we can do. We can sell everything, liquidate whatever assets we have left." "I've already tried that." Theodore's laugh was bitter and hollow. "The house is mortgaged to the hilt. The cars are leased. Even your mother's jewelry is gone. I pawned it months ago to make minimum payments." The mention of her mother's jewelry hit Celeste like a physical blow. Those pieces had been the only tangible connection she had left to the woman who had died when Celeste was just 16. "You sold Mama's necklace? The one with the sapphires?" Theodore couldn't meet her eyes. "I had no choice." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry for everything." Before Celeste could respond, the doorbell rang. The sound seemed to echo through the mansion like a warning bell. Theodore's face went pale as he checked his watch. "She's early. Who's early?" Celeste asked. But her father was already rising from his chair, straightening his rumpled shirt and attempting to compose himself. "There's someone I need you to meet," he said, his voice taking on a strange formality. "Someone who might be able to help us." Celeste followed her father to the front door, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. When Theodore opened the door, she was struck by the sight of an elegantly dressed woman in her early 60s. The woman's silver hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and her designer suit probably cost more than most people's cars. It was her eyes that caught Celeste's attention, cold, calculating, and utterly without warmth. "Mrs. Cross," Theodore said, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and dread. "Thank you for coming." Victoria Cross stepped into the foyer, her sharp gaze sweeping over the faded grandeur of the mansion before settling on Celeste. "So this is your daughter?" Her voice was crisp and businesslike, as if she were evaluating a piece of merchandise. "Celeste, this is Victoria Cross," Theodore said, his hands wringing nervously. "She's here to discuss a possible solution to our problems." Victoria circled Celeste slowly, her eyes taking in every detail from her auburn hair to her delicate features to the way she held herself with natural poise. "She's beautiful," Victoria said finally, as if Celeste weren't standing right there. "Good breeding shows. She's been well educated, I assume." "Harvard," Theodore said quickly. "In art history, she speaks 3 languages and plays piano. Perfect." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "My son has very particular tastes." Celeste felt a growing sense of unease. "I'm sorry, but what does this have to do with our financial situation?" Victoria's attention snapped to her, and Celeste saw something predatory in the older woman's eyes. "My dear, you are the solution to your father's financial situation." The price of desperation, the words made no sense to Celeste. "I don't understand." Theodore looked like he might be sick. "Celeste, Mrs. Cross has made us an offer. A very generous offer that would clear all our debts and leave us with enough to start fresh." "What kind of offer?" Celeste asked, though every instinct was screaming that she didn't want to know. Victoria moved to the window, gazing out at the storm with apparent satisfaction. "My son Damian is 34 years old and has built a technology empire worth over $20 billion. He's brilliant, ruthless, and completely focused on his work. Fortunately, he's also completely uninterested in settling down and providing me with grandchildren." She turned back to face them, her expression businesslike. "I've decided to take matters into my own hands. Damian needs a wife Samayan, beautiful, educated, and from a good family. Someone who won't be after his money, because she'll be provided for regardless." The horrifying truth began to dawn on Celeste. "You want to buy me?" "I prefer to think of it as a business arrangement," Victoria said coolly. "Your father owes $15 million. I'm prepared to pay $20 million for your hand in marriage. To my son, that leaves you with $5 million to rebuild your lives." Celeste felt the world spinning around her. "This is insane. People don't buy wives in the 21st century, don't they?" Victoria's smile was cold. "Tell me, dear, what are your other options? Your father's creditors aren't known for their patience. Without this arrangement, you'll be lucky to escape. With your lives, let alone your freedom?" Theodore finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Celeste, I know how this sounds, but no." Celeste's voice was firm despite the tremor in her hands. "No, I won't do it. I won't be sold like property." Victoria's expression didn't change. "That's your choice, of course. Duh. But consider this me son is handsome, wealthy, and powerful. Could have a life most women only dream of. All you have to do is marry him and play the part of the beautiful wife. And if I refuse?" Victoria's smile vanished. "Then your father's creditors will collect their debt in other ways. They've been quite creative in the past, I'm told." The threat hung in the air like poison. Celeste looked at her father, seeing the fear and desperation in his eyes. He had made a devil's bargain, and now he was asking her to pay the price. "I need time to think," Celeste said finally. "I'm afraid time is a luxury you don't have," Victoria replied. "The wedding is scheduled for next month. I've already made the arrangements." "You planned this," Celeste realized. "You've been planning this for months." "I believe in being prepared," Victoria said. "Your father's financial difficulties presented an opportunity, and I never waste an opportunity." Theodore finally found his voice. "Celeste, please. I know it's not what you dreamed of, but it's not what I dreamed of." Celeste's voice rose. "Daddy, you're asking me to marry a complete stranger, a man who doesn't even know I exist." "Oh, but he does know," Victoria said with satisfaction. "I've shown him your photograph. He found you acceptable." The word acceptable hit Celeste like a slap. She was being reduced to nothing more than a transaction, a piece of property to be bought and sold. "What if I run away?" she asked desperately. Victoria's laugh was like ice cracking. "Where would you go? You've been sheltered your entire life. Besides, Running would only make your father's situation worse. Celeste felt trapped like a bird in a cage that was slowly closing around her. Every option led to the same conclusion, had no choice. "I want to meet him first," she said finally. Victoria nodded approvingly. "A wise decision. Damian will be here tomorrow evening? I suggest you make a good impression." After Victoria left, Celeste sat alone in the study, staring at the contract the woman had left behind. $20 million in exchange for her freedom. The numbers seemed surreal, like something from a dream. Theodore entered quietly, his face haggard with guilt. "Celeste, I don't," she said softly. "Just don't. I understand why you did it. I understand that you were desperate. But don't try to make this about love or protection or anything noble. You sold me, Daddy. You sold your own daughter." The words hit Theodore like physical blows, but he didn't deny them. "What will you do?" Celeste looked at the contract again, seeing her future written in legal terms and dollar amounts. "I'll marry him," she said finally. "But not for you. For me, because maybe, just maybe, I can find a way to make this work on my own terms." As she signed her name on the dotted line, Celeste felt something change inside her. The sheltered girl who had entered this room was gone, replaced by a woman who would have to find her own strength in a world that had already decided her fate. Tomorrow, she would meet the man who had bought her. Tomorrow, her real life would begin. The black limousine pulled into the circular driveway at exactly 7 o'clock, its sleek surface reflecting the mansion's fading grandeur like a dark mirror. Celeste watched from her bedroom window, her heart hammering against her ribs as she caught her first glimpse of the man who would own her future. Damian Cross stepped out of the vehicle with fluid grace, and even from her second-floor vantage point, Celeste could see why Victoria had been so confident in her choice. He was tall and powerfully built, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection across broad shoulders and a lean frame. His dark hair was styled with casual precision, and when he looked up at the mansion, she caught a glimpse of sharp, angular features that belonged in a magazine rather than her desperate reality. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch steel. Gray and utterly cold, scanning the property with the detached assessment of a businessman evaluating an acquisition. Celeste smoothed her emerald dress, one of the few remaining pieces from her former wardrobe that still fit properly. She had chosen it carefully, wanting to look dignified rather than desperate, though she wondered if it mattered. After all, she was already bought and paid for. The doorbell's chime echoed through the mansion like a funeral bell. Celeste took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked downstairs to meet her future husband. Theodore was already in the foyer, his hands shaking as he reached for the door. When it opened, Damian Cross filled the doorway with a presence that seemed to command the very air around him. Up close, he was even more intimidatingly, 6 feet 3 inches of contained power and barely restrained intensity. "Mr. Winters," Damian said, his voice a rich baritone that somehow managed to sound both cultured and dangerous. "I trust you received my mother's message about the arrangements." "Yes, of course," Theodore stammered. "Thank you for coming. This is my daughter, Celeste." Damian's gaze shifted to her, and Celeste felt as if she were being x-rayed. Those gray eyes moved over her with clinical assessment, taking in every detail from her carefully styled hair to the way she held herself despite the circumstances. She lifted her chin and met his stare directly, refusing to be cowed. "Miss Winters?" he said finally, offering a slight nod. "You're exactly as described." "And you're exactly as cold as I expected," Celeste replied, before she could stop herself. A flicker of something surprise, amusement, crossed Damian's features. "I see you have spirit, good. I have no use for simpering flowers." His throat nervously. "Perhaps we should move to the study." "I have some excellent brandy that won't be necessary," Damian said, his attention still fixed on Celeste. "I'd like to speak with your daughter privately." "I don't think that's," Theodore began. "It wasn't a request," Damian said quietly, but with such authority that Theodore immediately stepped back. Celeste felt a chill at the casual display of power, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "The garden, then. I could use some fresh air." They walked through the mansion in silence, Celeste acutely aware of Damian's presence beside her. He moved with the predatory grace of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, and she wondered what he saw when he looked at her deteriorating. Home. The garden had once been her mother's pride and joy, but now it was overgrown and wild, another casualty of their financial collapse. Celeste led him to a stone bench beneath an ancient oak tree, its branches heavy with the promise of storm. "So," Damian said, settling beside her with careful distance, "what are your thoughts on this arrangement?" The question caught her off guard. She had expected commands, not conversation. "My thoughts? I think it's medieval. I think your mother is a manipulative woman who saw an opportunity and took it. And I think you're a coward for letting her arrange your marriage instead of finding love on your own." Damian's eyebrows rose. "You don't mince words, do you? What would be the point? You've already decided to buy me. The least I can do is be honest about what you're getting." "What am I getting, Miss Winters?" Celeste turned to face him, fully studying his profile in the fading light. "A woman who will marry you because she has no choice. Someone who will play the part of the dutiful wife in public, but who will never truly belong to you. It's a beautiful ornament for your arm. Who will give you children if required and maintain your household with perfect efficiency." "That sounds like exactly what I need," Damian said, but something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely pleased with her assessment. "Then we understand each other," Celeste said. "But I have conditions." This time Damian's surprise was unmistakable. Conditions. "I may be bought, but I'm not owned. I want my own space in whatever house we'll share. I want access to funds for my personal use. I want the right to continue my education. I was working on my master's degree before my father's problems came to light." Damian studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're negotiating the terms of your own sale. I'm establishing boundaries. If this is to be a business arrangement, as your mother insists, then I want the terms clearly defined. And if I refuse—" Celeste met his gaze steadily. "Then you'll have a wife who hates you instead of one who simply doesn't know you yet." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Finally, Damian spoke. "You're not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" Broken girl desperate for rescue, someone grateful for the opportunity to escape. "Her circumstances." Celeste laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I am desperate, Mr. Cross. Make no mistake about that. But I'm not broken, and I'm certainly not grateful. I'm a woman making the best of an impossible situation." "Are you?" Damian asked quietly. "Or are you a woman who's afraid to admit she wants something more than this crumbling mansion and a father who gambled away her future?" The words hit closer to home than Celeste cared to admit. "What I want is irrelevant. What I have is a choice between marrying you or watching my father be destroyed by dangerous men. It's not much of a choice, but it's the only one I have." "There's always another choice," Damian said, standing abruptly. "You could run away, disappear, start over somewhere else." "With what money? What resources?" "Your mother was right. I've been sheltered my entire life. I have no practical skills, no connections outside this world. Running would only postpone the inevitable." Damian was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the overgrown garden. "The wedding is in 3 weeks, he said finally. "I'll have papers drawn up outlining your conditions. You'll find me a generous husband in practical matters and in impractical matters." He turned back to her, his expression once again cold and distant. "Don't expect love, Miss Winters. Don't expect romance or affection or any of the things naive girls dream about. This is a business arrangement, nothing more." "I wouldn't dream of it," Celeste said, rising to face him. "But don't expect blind obedience either, Mr. Cross. You may have bought my presence, but you haven't bought my soul." For a moment, something flickered in Damian's ice, respect, perhaps, or challenge. Then the mask slipped back into place. "We'll see," he said simply, and walked away, leaving Celeste alone in the growing darkness with only the sound of distant thunder for company. The wedding and after the wedding took place on a cold morning in October in a small chapel that Victoria Cross had rented for the occasion. There were no friends or family in attend and jest. The officiant, Victoria, Theodore, and a handful of witnesses whose names Celeste never learned. The ceremony was efficient and soulless. Lasting barely 15 minutes, Celeste wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. The vintage lace felt like armor against her skin, and she drew strength from the knowledge that her mother had worn it on a day filled with hope and love, even if her own wedding was a transaction. She could honor the memory of a marriage that had been real. Damian wore a perfectly tailored black suit and an expression of polite indifference. He spoke his vows clearly and without emotion, slipped a platinum band onto her finger with the efficiency of a man signing a contract, and kissed her with the same passion he might have shown while shaking hands with a business partner. "It's done," Victoria said with satisfaction as they signed the marriage certificate. "Welcome to the family, Celeste." Theodore looked like he might faint. He hadn't spoken a word to his daughter since arriving at the chapel, and when Celeste looked at him, she saw only guilt and shame in his eyes. She felt nothing for him, not anger, not love, not even disappointment. The man who had raised her had died the moment he signed her away. The reception was held at Damian's penthouse, a sprawling monument to success that occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. The space was all clean lines and cold surfaces, beautiful in the way that expensive things were beautiful, but utterly without warmth or personality. "This is your home now," Damian said, giving her a brief tour. "Your suite is on the 2nd floor. You'll find everything you need has been provided." Her suite turned out to be larger than most apartments, with a bedroom, sitting room, and private bathroom all decorated in shades of cream and gold. It was luxurious and impersonal, like a high-end hotel room designed for extended stays. "The staff will handle your meals and any other needs," Damian continued. "I keep irregular hours due to my work, so you'll have the run of the place most of the time. The only room that's off-limits is my office on the 3rd floor." "And your bedroom?" Celeste asked. "Also off-limits, unless specifically invited." She nodded, understanding the boundaries he was establishing. "What about my conditions? The ones we discussed?" "Papers are on your desk. You'll find the terms generosa. Monthly allowance, access to continuing education, and complete autonomy over your personal schedule. In return, you'll attend social functions as my wife, maintain the household, and present a united front in public. And children?" Damian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "I can be discussed later, if and when it becomes relevant." He left her alone after that, and Celeste found herself standing in the middle of her gilded cage, still wearing her mother's wedding dress, married to a man who spoke to her like a business associate and treated her like an expensive acquisition. The first weeks of their marriage established a pattern that would define their relationship. Damian left early and returned late, sometimes not at all. They shared breakfast when their schedules aligned, speaking politely about neutral topics like current events or the weather. They attended social functions, Togathor charity galas, business dinners, art openings where Damian was attentive and charming, playing the part of the devoted husband with Oscar-worthy skill. But at home, he was distant and cold, treating her with the same courteous indifference you might show a house guest who had overstayed their welcome. Celeste threw herself into her studies, enrolled in an online graduate program in art history. She spent her days reading, writing, and exploring the city that was now her home. She discovered museums and galleries, coffee shops and bookstores, slowly building a life that existed entirely separate from her husband, the Staffa housekeeper, named Mrs. Chen, a cook named James, and a driver named Marcus Ware, kind but professional, treating her with the respectful distance that household employees maintained with their employers. Celeste began to feel like a ghost haunting her own life. It was during their 2nd month of marriage that everything changed. Celeste had been working late in the library, surrounded by art books and research notes, when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It was coming from the direction of Damian's officia low, agonized groan that spoke of pain so intense it transcended physical boundaries. She found him collapsed on the floor of his office, his face pale and twisted with agony, his hands pressed to his temples as if he could physically hold his skull together. His breathing was shallow and ragged, and when he looked up at her, his eyes were wide with panic. Migraine. He managed to gasp. "Bad one." Celeste had never seen him vulnerable before. The controlled, commanding man she had married was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken and desperate. Without thinking, she knelt beside him. "What can I do? Should I call a doctor?" "No doctors," he said through gritted teeth. "Just help. Meet in my room. The medication is in the bathroom." Yes. She helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as he leaned heavily against her. His bedroom was as impersonal as the rest of the penthouse, all black and chrome and expensive furniture that looked like it had never been lived in. The medication was a prescription bottle filled with serious-looking pills. Celeste read the label, powerful painkiller that required careful dosing. She gave him 2 pills with a glass of water, then helped him lie down on the bed. "The lights," he whispered, and she quickly dimmed them to almost nothing. "Is there anything else? Ice? A cool cloth? Just quiet, please?" Celeste settled into the chair beside his bed, not wanting to leave him alone in such condition. She watched his face gradually relax as the medication took effect, the lines of pain slowly smoothing away until he looked younger, more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. He slept for 12 hours. When he woke, Celeste was still there, reading by the light of a single lamp. He looked at her with confusion, as if he couldn't quite remember how she had come to be in his room. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "You were in pain," she replied simply. "I couldn't leave you alone." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore so consistently. "You didn't have to do that. It's not in your job description." "Maybe not," Celeste said, closing her book. "But it's what any decent person would do." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the strange feeling that he was seeing her clearly for the first time since their wedding day. "Thank you," he said finally, and the words carried more weight than she had expected. "You're welcome." She replied and meant it. As she left his room, Celeste realized that something fundamental had changed between them. She had seen behind the mask, glimpsed the man beneath the carefully constructed facade. And for the first time since their wedding, she wondered if there might be more to Damian Cross than cold ambition and ruthless control. Perhaps. She thought there was a human being hiding underneath all that ice. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out. Melting ice the morning after the migraine incident, Celeste woke to find a single white rose on her breakfast tray, accompanied by a handwritten note. "Thank you for your kindness. D." It was the first personal gesture Damian had made since their wedding, and it sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. When she saw him later that day, he didn't mention the rose or the note. But there was something different in the way he looked at her, a softness that hadn't been there before. Over the following weeks, small changes began to appear in their routine. Damian started joining her for dinner more often, and their conversations gradually moved beyond polite small talk. I asked about her studies, her thoughts on the art exhibitions they attended together, her opinion on books she was reading. She found herself looking forward to these moments, surprised by his intelligence and dry humor when he allowed his guard to drop. One evening, as they sat in the library after dinner, Celeste noticed him rubbing his temples with a familiar gesture. "Another headache?" she asked gently. "Just tension," he said, but she could see the strain in his face. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the chair beside him. He nodded, and she moved to sit behind him, her hands settling on his shoulders. She could feel the knots of tension in his muscles, the way he held himself rigid, even in his own home. Slowly, carefully, she began to massage the tight spots, working out the stress that he carried like armor. "Better?" she asked after several minutes. "Much," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My mother," Celeste said. "She used to get headaches when she was ill. I was the only one who could help her feel better." "Tell me about her," Damian said, turning to face her. It was the first time he had asked about her family, about her life before their marriage. Celeste found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years, memories of her mother's garden, the way she had sung while cooking, the strength she had shown even while dying. "She would have liked you," Celeste said finally. "It'd been knowing how we came to be married." "She would have seen past the circumstances to the man underneath," Celeste said. "She was good at that, seeing people's true selves." "What do you see when you look at me?" Damian asked, his gray eyes searching her face. Celeste considered the question carefully.
I.
I see a man who's forgotten how to be vulnerable. Someone who's built walls so high he can't remember what it feels like to let someone in. But I also see kindness when you think no one is watching. It's intelligence that goes beyond business acumen. And loneliness, even though you're surrounded by people all the time. Damian was quiet for a long moment. My mother arranged this marriage because she thought I needed a wife to complete my image. Out. But I think she was wrong about what I needed. What do you need? I need someone who sees me as more than a collection of achievements and bank accounts. Someone who cares whether I'm in pain, who notices when I'm struggling, who doesn't want anything from me except my company. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Celeste felt her heart beating faster, aware that they were standing at the edge of something that could change everything. Damian, she said softly, this doesn't have to be just a business arrangement. We could be friends, at least. We could try to build something real. I don't know how, he admitted. I've been playing a role for so long, I'm not sure I remember who I really am underneath it all. Then we'll figure it out together, Celeste said, reaching out to take his hand. No pressure, no expectations, just two people trying to find their way to something better than what we have now. He looked down at their joined hands, and when he looked up again, there was wonder in his eyes. You would do that? After everything my mother did to you? After the way I've treated you? I would do that, Celeste said, because I think underneath all that ice, there's a man worth knowing. And because I'm tired of being lonely too. The kiss that followed was nothing like the cold, perfunctory one they had shared at their wedding. This was tentative and sweet, full of possibility and promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I want to try, Damian said. I want to be the man you see when you look at me. You already are, Celeste said. You just need to let him out. Over the next several months, their relationship transformed in ways that surprised them both. Damian began sharing stories of his childhood, his struggles with his domineering mother, his fears about living up to impossible expectations. Celeste told him about her dreams, her love of art and literature, her desire to build a life that meant something beyond social status and material wealth. They traveled together, not for business but for pleasure, exploring cities and cultures that fascinated them both. They spent lazy Sunday mornings in bed, talking and laughing like the friends they had become. They attended therapy sessions together, working through the trauma of their arranged marriage and learning to build something healthy and real. On their first wedding anniversary, Damian surprised Celeste with a trip to Paris. It's not to the luxury hotels and exclusive restaurants they had visited for business, but to small galleries and hidden cafes, places where she could indulge her passion for art. At the same time, discovered the joy of seeing the world through her eyes. I have something for you, he said one evening as they sat beside the Seine. Watching the lights reflect on the water, he handed her a small velvet box. When she opened it, she found a ring, not the expensive diamond he had given her at their wedding, but a simple band set with her mother's sapphire, the one Theodore had pawned to pay his debts. How did you? I tracked it down. Andrew purchased it, Damian said. I thought you should have something that belonged to her, something that represents love instead of obligation. Tears filled Celeste's eyes as she looked at the ring. This must have cost you a fortune. It was worth every penny to see that look on your face, Damian said, taking her hand. Celeste, I know our marriage didn't begin with love, but I want you to know that it has grown into something I never expected. You've changed me in ways I didn't think were possible. You've changed me too, she said, allowing him to slip the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. I was so angry when this all started, so bitter about being sold like property, but you've shown me that sometimes the most unexpected paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. I love you, Damian said, the words coming out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back for months. I love your strength, your intelligence, your capacity for forgiveness. I love the way you hum while you're reading. It's the way you worry about everyone but yourself, the way you make me want to be a better man. I love you too, Celeste replied, her heart full to overflowing. I love your hidden kindness, your brilliant mind, the way you pretend to be hard when you're actually incredibly soft. I love that you bought back my mother's ring, that you remember how I take my coffee, that you've never once made me feel like I owed you anything." When they kissed this time, it was with the passion of two people who had found something rare and precious in the most unlikely of circumstances. They had started as strangers in a business arrangement, but they had become partners in every sense of the word. 2 years later, Celeste stood in the nursery of their new home, a warm, welcoming house they had chosen together, far from the cold penthouse that had been their first shared space. She was arranging flowers in a vase when she felt familiar arms wrap around her from behind. "How are you feeling?" Damian asked, his hand settling protectively over her growing belly. "Tired but happy," she said, leaning back against his chest. "I can't believe we're going to be parents." "I can't believe how lucky I am," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my mother hadn't interfered in our lives." "We might never have met," Celeste said, "or we might have met under different circumstances and been too proud or too careful to let each other in." "Do you ever regret it? The way we began?" Celeste considered the question, thinking about all the pain and anger and confusion of those early days. "I regret the circumstances that led to it," she said finally. "I regret that my father felt he had no choice but to sell his daughter, and I regret that your mother felt she had to manipulate us both to get what she wanted. But I don't regret the outcome. I don't regret finding you. Even though it wasn't a fairy tale romance, especially because it wasn't," Celeste said, turning in his arms to face him. "Fairy tales are about perfection, about love at first sight and happily ever after. But real love is messier than that. It's about choosing each other every day, about growing together and forgiving each other's mistakes. It's about building something beautiful from broken pieces." "I couldn't have said it better myself," Damian said, cupping her face in his hands. "And I choose you, Celeste Cross. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that." "And I choose you," she replied, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. "My cold millionaire who turned out to have the warmest heart of all." As they stood together in their nursery, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, Celeste reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had started as victims of circumstance, two people forced together by desperation and manipulation. But they had chosen to become something more: partners, friends, lovers, and now, parents. Their love story had begun with a devil's bargain, but it had become something infinitely more precious, a testament to the power of choice, forgiveness, and the human capacity to find light in the darkest of situations. Sometimes, Celeste thought, as she felt their baby kick against her ribs, the most beautiful flowers grow from the most unlikely soil. And sometimes, the coldest hearts hide the capacity for the deepest love. Their story was proof that even when life forces your hand, you can still choose what to do with the cards you're dealt. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you can turn a losing hand into the greatest victory of all. The end.